Welcome to the Fast Leader Podcast, where we explore convenient yet effective shortcuts that will help you get ahead and move forward faster by becoming a better leader. And now, here's your host, customer and employee engagement expert, and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, Jim Rimbach.
Need a powerful and entertaining way to ignite your next conference, retreat, or team building session? My keynotes don't include magic, but they do have the power to help your attendees take a leap forward by putting emotional intelligence into their employee engagement, and customer-centric leadership practices. So bring the infotainment creativity of the Fast Leader Show to your next event, and I'll help your attendees get over the hump now. Go to beyondmorale.com/speaking to learn more. Okay, Fast Leader Legion, today I'm excited because the guest that we have on the show today, I think can help every single one of us in this world, because he is the author of Stop Guessing: The 9 Behaviors of Great Problem Solvers. Nat Greene was raised in Hong Kong with his parents and sister Pat. He attended high school in which his class spoke 40 languages and hailed from 50 countries. But perhaps his favorite education was walking around Hong Kong with his father, a professor of metallurgy, learning about how different metals corroded and failed. Nat became quietly obsessed with engineering and fixing what was broken. Nat left for the UK to receive his master's degree from Oxford University in engineering science and a PGC from Cambridge in design, manufacturing, and management. After moving to the United States, he attended the Harvard Business School Owner-President Management Program and joined the Young Presidents Organization to improve his organizational leadership skills. Out of school, Nat became a professional problem solver and then co-founded Stroud in 2001 at the age of 28. He has led its growth into a global business, delivering unparalleled performance improvement results for businesses across the world. Nat's abundant thinking mindset serves as Stroud's guiding compass, and his vision for personal and professional development have helped Stroud win more of Consulting Magazine's Best Small Firm to Work For awards than any firm in history. In 2015, Nat co-founded Reconsider, expanding his mission of unleashing potential beyond business and into the American democracy. His long-term vision is to rebuild the middle ground in U.S. politics and enable the U.S. political system to expand prosperity for all Americans into the 21st century. Here, he co-authored Wedged, which examines the root causes behind American political polarization. In 2016, he launched his latest project, Stop Guessing, aimed at developing 1 million great problem solvers to solve the hardest and most pressing problems facing the world. In life, Nat strives every day to leap out of bed with excitement for what awaits him, and surrounds himself with people that are always teaching and challenging him. He ardently pursues his goal to start 40 new ventures that leverage market forces to make a major positive impact on the world. Nat is married to his college sweetheart, and together they have 4 children. They live in Marblehead, Massachusetts, by the ocean. Nat Greene, are you ready to help us get over the hump?
I am. I'm looking forward to it.
Nat, now I've given our listeners a little bit about you, but can you tell us what your current passion is so that we can get to know you even better?
What I'm really passionate about is helping people make better decisions. And I just see a large gap between what is happening at a macro level in our society, but also for individuals that I meet, in day-to-day interactions between, what they're actually experiencing and what could be happening for them and the success they could have and personal sort of happiness and so on. And my specific, because that's a very broad issue, right? My specific passion is about helping people become better problem solvers and better problem solvers on the hard problems that they face. So the problems that people have maybe pushed aside, started to ignore, could be something like your health, it's not where you want it to be. And you've tried a few things, but then now you ignore it. Or it could be something at work, like there was some goal the organization wanted to achieve, or you want to improve service levels and things, and you tried, and now you sort of accepted that it's as good as you can get without doing something radical or complex, right? Totally changing things. And those sorts of problems where people have tried and they've tried to help, or you've worked hard at it, and there may be many, many possible root causes. It's a complex situation, and people don't have the ability to go out there and win at it, and so they've given up.
Gosh, Nat, there's so many things that was actually just running through my head as you were talking and explaining, trying to help people, over these humps of making these decisions. And that is, I started thinking about a couple things. One being is, the issue associated with creative thinking. And we know that we have to do a better job at our creative thinking in order to be able to innovate and see new pathways and perspectives and things like that to, make those changes that are necessary. And A lot of the research associated with, creative thinking is revealing that as societies more advanced in modern Western societies, when we start looking at the education systems and things like that, we're actually stripping out creative thinking, as one of the, just say tool sets or even muscle builders to be able to solve problems. So how do you help people overcome that?
Well, it's interesting because what you say, I think there are some different viewpoints on it. And I've certainly seen some things, and I can't cite them off at the top of my head, right? But seen some evidence that people are actually, you get a less creative result when you have people sit in a room and brainstorm. Because what happens is you rapidly get groupthink. And we know that in a situation with lots of people, you're going to end up with someone who's dominant, or people respect more, or there's, sometimes there's fear in environments. And very rapidly, when people start to brainstorm and come up with ideas, which a lot of people would call a creative way of approaching a problem, you actually very rapidly end up with very few options. And what they've shown, and what I've read, is that you're much better off having people think about a problem independently, and then bringing them together to share what they've thought of, then drive in what would be traditionally seen as a very creative way. And this is particularly important with hard problems because hard problems are sort of immune to guesswork. If there's 2 or 3 options, right? The picture falls off your wall. You hear it thump to the floor. And you might think, oh, why did that fall off the wall? Well, and everyone's probably thought, well, maybe the hook fell off, or the wall was weak, or maybe someone bumped it. But there's only really, if we could spend an hour, we'd probably only come up with 4 possible things that are sensible. I asked this yesterday at a meeting, and one guy said, maybe there was a local increase in gravity. And that was way out there. But there's only a few items, right? But when you have a really hard problem, you have people trying to be creative to solve it, then unless it's pushing into the realm of unknown, like, things that humans don't understand about at all, but if it's a practical problem, okay, then you're wasting your time because there might be 10,000 potential root causes there. And the chances of you guessing it in a creative way are very slim. And again, particularly if you've already had a lot of people have a go. And so, I'd say that creativity and problem solving, it's great, but you've got to be very careful about what you even mean by it. And I think with certain types of problems, it's a disaster.
That's a very interesting point. And as you were talking about those things, I started thinking about several things. First of all, I started thinking about the bias issue. You started talking about the groupthink, right?
Yeah.
And we start also focusing on certain problems within the confines, of the problem. And then we get into a divergent and convergent thinking problem. I don't start thinking, divergent and do that first and in isolation and by itself. I start combining the two. So that's a problem. Yeah. And then also the whole diversity issue. If I have some people who are, similar backgrounds, similar personalities, similar, positions and responsibilities that, there's going to be an issue coming up with different perspectives. So I think the whole pre-planning piece, and when you start thinking about people being able to overcome and problem solve, how much effort do they put into that whole pre-planning piece before they tackle a problem? Do they actually do?
It's great. I think people have great intentions when it comes to problem solving. I just don't think they have been trained in how to approach hard problems very well. And so I don't see a lot of planning going on where, because people just haven't been shown how to do it. They don't know how to approach it, and the behaviors haven't been developed. Now, there are exceptions, right? There are some tremendously good problem solvers and people who've been trained, at great length and know how to do this, and they approach it in a very methodical way. And these are some of the people I've been able to study firsthand over the last 20 years in my career to see what it is they do. But by and large, people, behave in a new situation in the way they behave in their everyday situation. And their everyday situation is confronting relatively simple problems and guessing at them, or having a group of people guess, as you say, to get some broader perspective. Hopefully you get some diversity. If you're going to guess, you might as well have some people with different backgrounds and ideas, right? You're going to get a better outcome. But they're used to that with simple problems. And then they just take that same approach to, harder problems. And of course it doesn't work. But why would someone turn up in a new situation that requires a new skill and suddenly invent a new way of looking at things? So we're sort of, the success that we have in solving simple problems by guessing is almost like our biggest handicap when it comes to approaching hard problems.
So when you think about people guessing, where do you find that most people fall down and actually really do themselves damage in regards to guessing?
Well, when you're guessing, you're pretty much limiting yourself to the realm of the known. Okay, because it's very hard to guess something you don't know. You can go discover something you don't know, but it's very hard to guess it. And so you sort of, all you end up doing is you maybe can do some benchmarking. You maybe can sort of steal some ideas off a competitor, get somebody with some outside experience, help you guess what might work for you. Or you're recycling things that haven't worked. Because by definition, if you're guessing at something you already know, but you've got a continuing problem in your own business, well, why didn't you try it? You either didn't try it before, or you either tried it before and it didn't work, in which case that's just madness. Or you thought of the idea before and you were unable to execute on it, in which case you're working on the wrong problem anyway. Your problem is, why didn't you execute on a great idea? Maybe you should think about that. So that's, the problem I have with guessing and where people go wrong, the most in my mind.
So when you started thinking, and when you and I had the opportunity to talk a little bit off mic before we started our interview, and I started mentioning how, for me, when I started thinking about problem solving, started thinking about, these biases, all of these other things, as I started thinking about the way that we actually make decisions. And so a lot of, validation in regards to how we do that is really based on emotion. We decide emotionally and then we validate rationally. And so our subconscious mind is just doing, 10,000 times more calculations and trying to connect things in our head before it actually even makes the attempt to reveal it to our conscious mind. So when you start thinking about problem solving, how does that bottleneck issue, or how emotions come into play with people making the right decision?
Well, I think what you've got to do is train people to sort of put that aside as much as you can. You're never going to get away from it, as you said. It's always present, so you have to acknowledge it. But the role of a leader is to, obviously to role model this, but also to make sure that there are there's a culture and a way of doing business that minimizes that. And that's again why did I call the book Stop Guessing? Because I think that's the first thing you got to do. If you want to push away this sort of emotion response and then the natural tendency to then find data that backs up the decision that you already made, right? And then we tell ourselves this story that, aren't we rational beings? I logically thought of this and then that was the answer. No, you decided you wanted that to be the answer and then you just found anything you could that would corroborate it. And again, that might work on a simple thing, but it doesn't work in hard things. And so as a leader, what you've got to do is you've got to stamp that out as much as possible. You're not in day-to-day situations where that might be appropriate. That blink response might be necessary or might make you move swiftly or give you sort of some hidden intelligence that you didn't understand, because it's sort of more subconscious, interacting with people, things like that. I'm not saying there, but where you have like a hard practical problem that's been persisting, even things like, this great example I remember from a few years ago, a colleague of mine told me this story. He was working for a client and they were in a distribution business. And so customer sort of satisfaction, very, very important. They could buy from competitors. And what they were trying to have is an in full on time, for their orders, service rate in the high 90s, and sort of 98% or better. And yet the leader of this division, he was getting calls from customers like they were really angry with him. Okay, and he's like, that's a problem. What's going on? What's going on here? We're not looking after our customers properly. And he went and checked the data. He said, well, tell me what's going on here? What's our service level? And they said 98% is our service level. We're doing great. And so he's there. You could look at this in a couple of ways, right? Most people would automatically react going, oh, there just must be unreasonable customers, right? And we stop there. And if you allow your people to do that, or if you allow yourself to do that sort of thing, like, respond in a guess what the solution is. Well, my guess is very convenient. My guess is that they're just unreasonable. It's lovely politically because it means I don't have to do anything. Now, of course, when a few more customers leave, you might start worrying about it. And then you might be more self-reflective and you might go, well, hey, maybe the market's changing. What I need to do is to change because now maybe we need 99% on this measure to serve our customers. In reality, what it turned out to be was that the measure was wrong. Somewhere in their system of calculating their service levels, there was a breakdown and it was nobody's fault specifically. Obviously, someone was responsible for it, but nobody was doing anything intentional. And the service level was closer to 40%. And, with 40%, it was like, oh my goodness, I'm amazed we haven't lost all our customers. And you could then go do something about it. But you never lie, you never wake up in the morning and go, I guess that our service level's reported wrong and it's 40% and it must be this specific error in this sort of computer program that calculates it for us. I mean, it's so unlikely that you would ever guess that. And that's quite a simple problem, a customer being upset and calling you. This isn't sort of, it's known, and they're giving you the gift of telling you exactly what's wrong. And so, that's where you can go wrong with guessing.
So, and, one of the things that I've noticed is that you've made yourself, as you were explaining all of this, a very, very clear distinction between the simple problems and the big complex problems. So if you were to talk about the approach to the big complex problems, what advice would you give folks?
Okay, well, obviously I'm going to start by saying stop guessing. You've got to train yourself to recognize when you are. And people call guessing, because guessing doesn't sound very nice, right? So they use all kinds of other nice sounding words like hypothesis or idea, many, many words that you can use. Brainstorming, we've already touched on. And so you've got to recognize what that is, and that by all means, have a quick go at it, but then you've got to shut it off. And that might mean that you need to make a game out of it. So one of the things we do sometimes is we got a group of people and they just sort of want to tell you what they think because, they want to be right. And there's nothing wrong with that. So it's unlikely, but that's fine. So what we do is we have them write down what they think the solution is, put it in an envelope, right? You just seal it up, and then we just leave it at the front of the room. And in a few weeks, when we've worked on this hard problem and crushed it, we can open up and see who's right. But it doesn't even matter often if someone is right. I mean, we've worked on really complicated problems. There might be hundreds of people working in a facility, and they all have like 10 ideas as to what it would be. I mean, someone's going to be right, but it doesn't matter. So even when someone's right when guessing, you're not going to make big changes because of that. You're not going to take a risky thing, because some of these problems are crazy. I mean, in my book, I talk about a problem that I solved many years ago, and it's a long story, but this launch of this new product was being held up, and it was a real problem for the business because they were putting some large retailers on allocation, which is never a good thing. And it turned out that I helped solve the problem by removing one loose bolt that was in the machine. And that was it. And so, imagine if we'd had this guess-a-thon and I'd said, hey, maybe there's a loose bolt in the machine and we should go remove it. People would have thrown me out. I'd have been never invited back. And so, stop guessing, right? But then, some other things you need to do, I mean, we recommend highly is get out there, and I call it smell the problem. You've got to get out there and use all your senses to go and study the problem. What most people do, rather than do that, is they spend time trying to think about the solution. And again, if you think about it, I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. You spend all this time trying to think of solutions. And of course, there could be millions of solutions to different problems. And if you don't know what your problem is, how could you possibly come up with the right solution? So get in there, and great problem solvers, they just go look at the problem. And you'll find them staring at things. And, if it's in some business, something's wrong in the warehouse or something, they'll be watching what's going on. They'll be looking at records, trying to get data. Whatever, if it's a production process, something's coming out, it just doesn't work. They don't just look at one broken one. They'll be looking at several. They'll be trying to find patterns of failure and these sorts of things that, people, when they're thinking, they look for all the time, sometimes subconsciously, but, you can actively do. So you get out there and smell the problem. And, what that allows you to do is really understand the problem you're trying to solve. And people lose sight of that. And when you can define a problem really well, you're halfway to solving it. So there's a bunch of other behaviors I can touch on, but those are some of the things that I recommend you go do.
Well, I mean, one thing that stood out to me, and thanks for sharing, is that, and I see a lot of people doing this all the time, is they want to, analyze instead of, actually, putting yourself or immersing yourself in it. And so that never works. But, we have a situation now where a lot of folks are, don't have that, operational experience, and don't know how their business actually works and how their business makes money. I mean, their job is to, analyze data and to look at trends and to look at defect rates and to do all of those things. And, we've kind of, conditioned them to do such. But I think you're right. Sometimes you just have to get your hands dirty. And I would say most of the time you have to get your hands dirty. It's going to give you a different perspective that you never had before. But a lot of this, I mean, when you start talking about guessing, change, making mistakes, I mean, all of those things, there's a whole lot of emotion that gets tied up into it. And we, oftentimes to persevere, you use that word, is that we need help to do that. And one of the things that we look at on the show is quotes, to help us do some of that, persevering. Is there a quote that you like that you can share?
Yeah, there's loads, but this is one of my favorite. Whether you believe you can do a thing or not, you are right. And it's a Henry Ford quote. It's well known. And, to me, this what this means is, you've got no guarantee that you're going to make progress, of course. But if you decide you're not going to make progress, you're certainly not going to make any progress. So you can't guarantee you'll solve the problem, but you can decide you're going to fail at the beginning. And that's sadly what most people have done with most of the hard problems that they come across, is they've decided it can't be solved. And there's many ways to make that decision, not try at all, just be intimidated. But you can also come up with other more complicated stories like, well, it's probably going to be a really hard solution and it's probably going to be too expensive and I can't invest in that. But what I'd encourage people to do is, how would you behave if you thought that the solution might be something as simple as removing a loose bolt from a machine? Or the solution to your customers fleeing might be that you're just not measuring the service level right. And so people don't, your team don't know that there's a problem. Otherwise they'd fix it. Right? And if you believe every problem you saw, if you instead tell yourself a story that, hey, there is a chance that there'll be a really simple solution, elegant one, embarrassingly simple solution, then at least you're going to give it a go.
I think that's great advice. And I think for all of us, there's times in life where we kind of have that, self-sabotage and, those things where we've had to, maybe knock our head and fall down and get back up and try again. And, we have all kinds of humps that we have to get over. Is there a time that you can think about where you've had a hump to get over and you learned something new that you can share?
Oh, the hump. Yeah, there's plenty of them. But I think the most relevant one here is, over the last decade, I've sort of become a bit disillusioned about some of the direction of the country, of how our country's going. But specifically around that, and of course, people fill their mind now with guesses as to why. I'm sure everyone's got an idea, right? But so I'll tell you rather than have you guess. But the reason is it's just I've found an inability of reasonable people to have a reasonable discussion on things. And these are, and I'm not talking about, different people, red versus blue and different people from, I mean, people who are like basically the same group of people. I live up in the Northeast and in my town, a lovely little town, and there's a bunch of sort of well-educated, lovely, respectable people who I have as friends. And even amongst that friend group, I'd find people who, they can't sort of pause and have a decent discussion and think about problems and work through them and like get the data. I find they come and they're already dug in on some position and typically terrible problem solving. They've not really looked into the problem and that sort of thing. And so I was becoming quite disappointed because if there's no process for people to solve problems, and if there's not the willingness, and if they haven't developed the skills to do it, how are we going to move forward? Because we've got tremendous opportunities ahead of us. I'm hugely optimistic about the future. I'm a very optimistic guy, but why does it need to be so painful to get there? And it's a great cost. We waste our treasure and lives and spirit and happiness along the way, and we don't need to. The outcome will be fine, but just a journey could be nicer. And so I was becoming a bit disillusioned and sort of withdrawing. And I found I was withdrawing from things that are actually very important to me. Withdrawing from contributing some things, withdrawing from discussing things with people that were important. And particularly controversial things and where I could learn and understand them better by getting into dialogue with people. What lesson would I draw from that? I don't really know because I'm still digging myself out of this. And I think like if you ask me in a year and in 2 years and in 10 years, I'll have different and more sophisticated lessons. But at the moment, the thing I sort of grasp onto is just that hope. When you're facing a hard problem or something daunting that, maybe puts you on the edge of despair that you can't think of a solution, you've got to have hope. And without hope, there's like no moving forward because, again, a simple problem is like, well, whatever, but something that's hard and especially personal challenges, with hope, you can do anything. And without it, it's very hard to move forward. And that's sort of my lesson. And so I've had to rekindle, like focus on the hope aspect, where things are going well. So instead of seeing people not being able to have a decent dialogue, when I do see someone behaving well, I focus on that now.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And as you were talking, I started thinking about really we're kindred spirits in a lot of ways as far as that's concerned. And one of the things that I had done and came to a few realizations is that I can't have those types of discussions and even do that amongst my friends because they're talking about a bias component, and talking about, there was a fear of, losing the relationship, so you don't really, connect and get deep enough. You don't also, I know that person. I know you've done this in the past, and you bring that along with you. And so what I found is that I actually had to find and create a mastermind group of people that I didn't know, that I really didn't have any background with. And it really allowed for dialogue to occur that I just couldn't have with people who I knew. And now the result of that, and here's where I have to be talking about being more mindful and aware of, is that if I do get into, a close, personal relationship with one of those folks, I now have to consider whether or not they should be part of the mastermind group, right? And so you kind of have to meet that crossroads as well. But I couldn't crack what you're talking about. I couldn't crack that inner, or that outer, hard shell of my disillusionment, and how do I get to a deeper sense of understanding and grow and, not have all these biases get in the way. And that was one way that I did it.
Wow, that's fascinating, because you're leading a dual life in some ways, right? You've got you with your friends and things where you have to hold back because of this dynamic out there, this political toxic dynamic, a lot of it's politics, but it's in all kinds of issues, right? And then you can be sort of yourself and explore, but with strangers. And that's where, that's the bit that I got to find a way to change, for everyone and myself. And, and the sort of epiphany for me came when, I realized that a lot of people do, when I would stand aside and when I saw I was withdrawing a bit, some friends would say, hey, no, look, we really value your contribution. You should, keep going. And yeah, sometimes it might be a little painful or hard at the time, but it makes me think, and, I really appreciate it. And that sort of switched to that hope side again of, okay, so like there is value. And what I realized is, maybe the problem is actually me, and that I need to continue to be challenging, but find a way to do it in a more effective way, in a gentler way, which meant number one is me toning it down just a little bit, giving people room to breathe and that sort of thing. And then also finding a way to challenge people away from the table while they have time to think. So, I've been focusing on how do I write more? How do I share ideas, or you find an article that someone's written that explains an issue well and share that, because then people can read it, and the emotional response and this sort of territorial identity, politics kind of response, they can have that and get over it, and it's not a personal thing. And then they can think about it, and then they can come back and they can maybe explain their thoughts. And of course, it doesn't always work. But that's sort of what I'm focused on now, is how to safely still challenge things, still challenge people to think about things and to problem solve in a productive, community-oriented way. But, without having to be, them having to feel threatened in the moment.
Well, I think what you just said, too, kind of goes back to what you were saying, a moment ago about people having to actually get out there and get their hands dirty, is that you can't just sit back and let yourself continue to be shut down by all of this. Is that you have to try something different and see what, potentially works for you. Now, I think that's really the key. Keep moving. So when you start thinking about all of the things that you got, going on, and all the discussion we've had, which has been great, is what is one thing that really excites you?
One thing that excites me. I hate the one thing question, you see, because there's always several things that excite me. But what I'd say is one of the things that excites me a lot, and that I'm focused on, is the willingness of people to learn. Okay, people really do want to learn, and I do think that when people get frustrated and angry, often it's to do with them and not you. And if you can find a way to allow people to sort of gently learn some lessons, and to do that in safety and comfort, then they'll, then they will do that. I mean, people are smart, and people are good. Okay, and we just sometimes fall in a hole. And so, my primary goal is to help people learn to be better problem solvers in just some simple ways. And that's what I'm really, really excited about. And I can tell that because I'm putting most of my time and energy into it.
And the Fast Leader Legion wishes you the very best. Now, before we move on, let's get a quick word from our sponsor. The number one thing that contributes to customer loyalty is emotions. So move onward and upward faster by gaining significantly deeper insight and understanding of your customer journey and personas with emotional intelligence. With your empathy mapping workshop, you'll learn how to evoke and influence the right customer emotions that generate improved customer loyalty and reduce your cost to operate. Get over your emotional hump now by going to empathymapping.com to learn more. All right, here we go, Fast Leader listeners. It's time for the Hump Day Hoedown. Okay, Nat, the Hump Day Hoedown is a part of our show where you give us good insights fast. So I'm going to ask you several questions, and your job is to give us a robust, yet rapid responses that are going to help us move onward and upward faster. Nat Greene, are you ready to hoe down?
Sure thing.
All right. So what do you think is holding you back from being an even better leader today?
I keep trying to jump the cliff in one bound, and I'm not Superman, and I got to break it into manageable pitches and, climb up a bit, find a ledge, and then hit the next piece, because it's just overwhelming when you try and do stuff that's too far out of your ability in one go.
What is the best leadership advice you have ever received?
I'm not sure on the best, but one thing I've heard that I've not heard in many places is about hiring and firing people. And sort of the question to ask yourself when you're having problems with an employee at work is knowing everything you know today. Okay, forget about what happened in the past when you made a decision to hire them. But knowing everything you know about them today and about the needs of the role, would you newly hire that person into the role? And if your answer is no, you need to take action.
What is one of your secrets that you believe contributes to your success?
I'm lazy. And by that, I mean that I don't like to do unnecessary things. And this leads me to cut out the nonsense and to delegate or to just totally kill work that doesn't really need to be done. And I think that's one of my secrets.
What do you feel is one of your best tools that helps you lead in business or life?
That's easy. Problem solving.
Okay. And what would be one book that you'd recommend to our listeners? And it could be from any genre. Of course, we'll put a link to the 9 behaviors of great problem solvers.
Excellent. Well, with that taken care of, then I would recommend everybody reads The Accidental Superpower by Peter Ziha. And it's a geopolitical book, and it'll give you a new perspective on what's going on in the world and how it's likely to affect you and your business. I think it's a brilliant book.
Okay, Fast Leader listeners, you can find links to that and other bonus information from today's show by going to fastleader.net/Nat Greene. Okay, Nat, this is my last Hump Day Hoedown question. Imagine you were given the opportunity to go back to the age of 25. And you've been given the opportunity to take the knowledge and skills that you have now back with you. But you can't take everything back. You can only choose one. So what skill or piece of knowledge would you take back with you, and why?
This is easy for me. It would be listen more. I've always had a lot to say, not always listened enough. And, if you listen more, it helps you understand people better and improve compassion and things like that. And that allows you to make better decisions where people are aligned with you so that you can move faster. And often people don't listen because they're impatient. And ironically, it actually slows you down.
Nat, it was an honor to spend time with you today. Can you please share with the Fast Leader Legion how they can connect with you?
You can connect with me via Stroud International, which is the consulting practice I run, or the best way is via Radically Better, which is my blog.
Nat Greene, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. The Fast Leader Legion honors you and thanks you for helping us get over the hump. Thank you for joining me on the Fast Leader Show today. For recaps, links from every show, special offers, and access to download and subscribe, if you haven't already, head on over to fastleader.net so we can help you move onward and upward faster.